If so, you are not alone, and this sensation is at the very heart of a global debate happening right now. Governments, specifically in Australia, are moving to ban social media entirely for anyone under the age of 16, claiming it will save the mental health of a generation. But is age really the problem, or is it something deeper within our psychology? In this video, we will explore why this ban is happening, why the data suggests it might backfire, and the hidden psychological concept known as dopamine purpose that matters far more than the date on your birth certificate.
Welcome back, Australia, where a landmark decision was proposed to block teenagers from platforms like TikTok and Instagram. It sounds like a protective parent's dream, a simple switch to turn off the bullying, the body image issues, and the addiction. But as we dig into the human mind, we find that simple switches rarely fix complex emotional engines. To understand this, we have to look past the politics and into the neurology of why we scroll, and why taking the phone away might be like putting a bandage on a broken bone. Let's dive into the 7 psychological signs that explain why connection, not restriction, is the true battleground. The first major psychological factor we must understand is the disappearance of the third place and the rise of the digital playground. Think back to the stories your parents or grandparents told you, stories about riding bikes until the streetlights came on, or hanging out at the local mall or the park without supervision. Those physical locations were known as third places, spaces that were not home and not school, where young people learned to socialize. Over the last 20 years, those spaces have largely vanished due to urbanization, strict loitering laws, and a culture of safety fears. The sign here is not that teenagers are obsessed with technology. It is that they are obsessed with each other, and the phone is the only place left where they are allowed to gather. When we see a child glued to a screen, psychology tells us they are often trying to simulate the hangouts that adults have regulated out of existence. Banning the digital space without restoring the physical space creates a profound isolation, leaving young minds in a vacuum where they have nowhere to go, neither online nor offline. The second sign explores a very old mechanism in our brains called psychological reactance, often known as the forbidden fruit effect. When a human being, especially a teenager who is biologically wired to seek independence, feels that their freedom is being threatened or controlled, their immediate psychological response is to fight to regain that freedom. This isn't just stubbornness. It is a developmental milestone where the brain is trying to establish autonomy. By implementing a hard ban, the psychological narrative shifts from social media is a tool to social media is a rebellion. We saw this in the prohibition eras of history. When you make the supply illegal without addressing the demand, you drive the behavior underground. The danger here is that by banning these platforms, we push young people toward darker, unregulated corners of the internet where encryption hides them from the very safety checks we are trying to enforce. It turns a public health issue into a secret struggle, increasing the shame associated with usage. This brings us to the core concept of this video, which is the difference between passive numbing and active connection, or what we call dopamine purpose. Not all screen time creates the same chemical reaction in the brain. Imagine 2 teenagers. One is on a messaging app, laughing with friends, planning a meetup, and sharing art they created. This is active connection, and it releases oxytocin alongside dopamine, fostering a sense of belonging. The second teenager is silently scrolling through an endless algorithmic feed for 3 hours, comparing their life to others and feeling inadequate. This is passive numbing. The ban treats these two behaviors as exactly the same because they happen on the same device. However, psychology tells us that dopamine purpose matters more than age. We need to ask, are we using the device to build a bridge to others? Or are we using it to build a wall against our own feelings? A blanket ban eliminates the bridge along with the wall, cutting off vital support networks for marginalized youth who may not feel safe in their physical schools or neighborhoods. The fourth sign is the algorithmic mirror and how it exploits vulnerability regardless of age. We often think that once someone turns 16 or 18 or 21, they suddenly have the mental armor to withstand the manipulation of big tech companies. But the data shows that adults are just as susceptible to the doom scroll as teenagers. The algorithms designed by these platforms are predatory. They are built to detect emotional fragility and serve content that keeps you engaged, often by triggering outrage or sadness. This is a mechanism known as variable ratio reinforcement, the same psychology used in slot machines. By focusing entirely on the age of the user, we ignore the toxicity of the design itself. A 16-year-old on their birthday does not magically grow a shield against a supercomputer designed to hack their attention span. The psychological conversation needs to shift from "how old are you?" to "how is this machine designed to manipulate you?" Because vulnerability is a human trait, not just a childish one.
Next, we must look at the concept of identity formation and the modern tribe. Adolescence is the critical period where we separate from our parents and find our tribe, the group of peers that reflects who we are becoming. In the modern world, these tribes are increasingly digital. For a young artist, a queer teenager in a conservative town, or a kid with a niche interest like coding or astrophysics, social media is often the only place they find their people. This is the psychology of validation. When we sever these connections, we aren't just turning off an entertainment channel, we are potentially inducing an identity crisis. The sign to look for here is the intense grief or panic a young person feels when their phone is taken away. It looks like addiction, and it can be, but often it is the terror of social death. They are not afraid of missing a video. They are afraid of ceasing to exist in their social world. Empathy requires us to understand that for the digital native, the online self is a real extension of the physical self.
The sixth point involves the danger of displacement without replacement. In therapy, if you take away a client's coping mechanism, even a bad one, like smoking or overeating, without giving them a healthier way to manage their stress, they will almost always spiral into something worse. Social media, for all its flaws, acts as a pacifier for high levels of academic pressure, economic anxiety, and global uncertainty. It is a way to check out when the real world feels overwhelming. If a ban is enforced, that anxiety does not disappear. It has to go somewhere. We might see a rise in other risk-taking behaviors, deeper withdrawal, or different forms of escapism that are harder to track. The psychological principle here is that behavior serves a function. If the function is stress relief, and we remove the tool, the need for relief remains. We must focus on reducing the pressure on young people, not just taking away their release valve. Finally, we have to talk about the difference between digital literacy and digital prohibition. Imagine we are trying to keep people safe from drowning in the ocean. Prohibition is building a giant wall around the beach and saying no one enters until they are 16. Literacy is teaching them how to swim, how to spot a rip current, and how to float when they get tired. Psychology favors education because it builds resilience. When we ban, we create a dependency on authority, meaning the child is safe only because the parent or the government says so. When we educate, we create internalized agency, meaning the child learns to regulate themselves. The data suggests that mentoring, sitting with a young person and talking about what they are seeing, asking them how it makes them feel, and setting boundaries together creates far better long-term mental health outcomes than a simple digital blackout. We want to raise adults who can manage technology, not adults who were hidden from it until they were thrown into the deep end. Recognizing these signs can be scary, especially if you are a parent worried about your child or a young person feeling the weight of these potential changes. It is easy to feel powerless when governments and giant corporations are fighting over what you can and cannot see. But awareness is the first step toward reclaiming your own mind. We don't have to wait for a law to change our relationship with our screens. We can start by looking at our dopamine purpose. The next time you pick up your phone, try a tiny baby step. Ask yourself, am I opening this to connect or to escape? Just that 1 second of pause can give you back your power. Thank you for listening to the Midnight Signal. We dove deep today into a topic that is messy and complicated, just like being human. I am curious to hear your thoughts on this global debate. Which of these signs resonated with you the most? Do you think a ban is the answer, or do we need to rebuild our physical communities instead? Let me know in the comments below. I read them to feel connected to you. Remember, whether you are 16 or 60, your feelings are valid and your mental health is worth protecting. Take care of yourself, and I will speak to you again very soon.